I'm Nate.
And I'm Rob.
And this is Rob and Nate Record a Podcast. It is December the 8th, 2019, and we are continuing our series of going through the IMDb Top 250 Movies list. We're just going through them as they appear on the website at the time of recording. Again,
on the date that we record.
Fluctuations with this over time. We're also intentionally avoiding looking at the list as we have before talking about them. So there's going to come up as a bit of a surprise to us as we work our way through. And almost all of the information that we go over is basically what we remember about the given film at this time.
Yeah, we're doing no prep for this.
No prep, no research, improvisational.
Yep.
Do you want to start?
Sure. So our previous recording was number 200 down to 151. So today we'll cover numbers 150 through 101. So starting with number 150, we start off with the 1980 Raging Bull, directed by Martin Scorsese. I have not seen this, though it's on my list, and I want to see it.
I've seen it. It's very well thought of. It's considered one of the best sports films of all time, one of the best movies of all time by many. It is the true story of the boxer Jack LaMotta and his rise, and not necessarily fall, but they deal with his long retirement. He lived to be quite elderly, if memory serves. Strong performance by Robert De Niro as LaMotta. It came out in 1980. It is entirely in black and white, which is an interesting directorial choice. Number 149 is Ran. This is an Akira Kurosawa film. I have seen this. It's set in medieval Japan. It is an adaptation of a Shakespeare play. I am blanking which one, though. It's about a king that has like 4 daughters, and he's got to choose which one's going to run the kingdom. Again, this is what happens when you don't really do research. But it was based on Shakespeare, but translated to Japan. It's quite good. It's quite long. Some great fight sequences in it.
Yeah, I'm aware of Kurosawa, but I really haven't seen many of his films, and I haven't seen this one either. So, number 148, Die Hard. This is a great film.
Die Hard more than likely will be its own episode at some point.
At some point in the future, we will end up recording an episode about Die Hard. There is, of course, debate amongst us about whether or not Die Hard is a true Christmas movie. And I come down on the side of it is not strictly a Christmas movie. Nate's on the other side.
I think to be contrarian more than anything, I'm going to say it is a Christmas movie.
Yeah. And we'll get into this when we record on that episode. My whole tenet in this argument is the central plot of the movie is not Christmas. Sure, it occurs at Christmas time, but its central plot is not Christmas.
Yeah. It is pretty close to perfect for the kind of movie it is. It's extremely rewatchable. It's very iconic. It really started the career of Alan Rickman for all intents and purposes, at least in American film.
Yeah.
And then it really is the film that made Bruce Willis a star.
Yep.
Number 147 is a Japanese film by Hayao Miyazaki called My Neighbor Totoro. I have seen this film. It is a classic. The character of Totoro is to Miyazaki's studio what Mickey Mouse is to Disney. It is about a family that moves, presumably from the city, to rural Japan. The film came out in 1988, and I think it's set probably maybe a decade earlier. It's a little vague. But these 2 girls move out with their father, I guess for work, and their mother is in the hospital. I forget precisely what's wrong with her, but they're separated from seeing her for some time. And they are befriended by Totoro and some other nature spirits that help them find peace. It's a sweet movie.
Yeah. I think I've seen part of this movie, but not the whole thing. So, number 146 on the list is the 1989 Steven Spielberg film, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I would say arguably the best of the Indiana Jones films. I am a little bit surprised that this is this high on the list, that there are some that we've discussed below this that I thought were better films than this. Not that this is a bad film, it's a good movie, but yeah.
It's been a long time since I've seen the Indiana Jones films. I need to revisit.
I watched it this week.
You watched it this week?
Yeah. I forget which of the streaming services it was on, but we ended up just turning it on one night, and yeah.
It's a fun film. The addition of Sean Connery to the cast just gives it this different quality than the other two Indiana Jones films have. It definitely feels like it's where the ending. It feels like it's the ending to something.
Yeah.
A lot of people did not care for Crystal Skull, which I didn't hate as much as most people. I kind of liked it, but I agree its quality is a fairly noticeable.
I thought the first three quarters of it was good, and then the last quarter was not.
Yeah, a lot of people weren't super cool with the twist-ish ending. But Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade is a great movie, and again, I need to revisit it. Number 145 from 1992, Unforgiven. This is a great Western directed and starring Clint Eastwood about a retired gunslinger who is pressed back into service. It's got Gene Hackman in it. It's got Morgan Freeman in it, Richard Harris. It's a great, gritty Western. It feels fresh. It has a wonderful energy to it. It's been a few years since I've seen it last time. I've probably seen it 2 or 3 times. It's very strong, deserving Oscar.
It's on my watch list, but I have not seen it. Nope.
It's a classic. You got to see it.
Yeah, you see the screen check mark here?
Okay.
That means it's on my watch list.
Okay. I'm kind of surprised you haven't seen it.
Yeah. Next on the list is the 1995 film from Martin Scorsese, Casino. Again, I have not seen this one.
I have not seen it either. It's on my list. It's very well thought of. It's a crime epic. Scorsese does those very well. Obviously, his new film, The Irishman, has been compared to this and to Goodfellas.
Yeah.
Number 143 is Heat by Michael Mann from 1995. This is, I believe, even though Al Pacino and Robert De Niro are in Godfather 2, they're not in Godfather 2 together because their timelines that their characters are in are decades apart. I believe this is the first film in which they played against each other. So Al Pacino is a police officer in Los Angeles. Robert De Niro is a criminal. They are kind of equally matched, and it's a great movie to see those two play against each other. It's got a good supporting cast, including Natalie Portman in one of her first roles, Val Kilmer, Jon Voight. This is the film that I have compared the movie The Dark Knight to.
Really?
The Dark Knight seems less like a traditional superhero film and more like Heat, because you got your big good and your big bad facing off. Very strong film. Highly recommend seeing it.
Yeah. Well, I just added it to my list. So, number 142 on the list, L.A. Confidential. Again, this is one I need to see, but I have not.
No, you saw it. We watched it together.
That's right. That's right. That's why it wasn't on my watch list.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is based on, I want to say, a James Ellroy novel.
Oh, yeah. Now I remember.
Directed by Curtis Hanson. Excellent cast. Kevin Spacey, Russell Crowe, Guy Pearce, Kim Basinger. Basinger won an Oscar for this. It is a sprawling story of corruption in early 1950s Los Angeles, centering on the police department.
Yep.
Excellent film.
Yep. Really good. I'm trying to remember. I guess I didn't put my rating in here, but yeah. Great film.
141, Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, 1998, from the British director Guy Ritchie, starring people Jason Statham is a name I recognize in the cast. I've heard this title, know basically nothing about it other than that it is apparently an action or crime film.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either. So, next on the list, one we actually recently watched, from 2001, A Beautiful Mind, a Ron Howard film starring Russell Crowe. This is a good film.
Yeah, did we rewatch it when we did Russell Crowe Month? I know we thought about it, but I can't remember if we actually rewatched it.
Oh no, we didn't, but I have seen it.
Yeah, well, it's a strong film. It won the Best Film Oscar in 2001. Stars Russell Crowe. It's based on the true story, though a good portion of it has been fictionalized, of a man with various psychological problems, mathematician in England, who would go on to win a Nobel Prize. X number of years ago, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago, him and his wife died in a car accident.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Number 139, it's another Hayao Miyazaki film, Howl's Moving Castle from 2004. Kind of hard to describe. There is a moving castle in the film. It's set in a fantasy world modeled loosely off early 20th century Europe. You kind of got to see it, or at least see a trailer to really get a sense of what this film is. You don't have a lot of experience, if any experience, with Miyazaki, right?
No, I think I said I've seen parts of at least one of the ones we've discussed previously on this list. I'm a little bit surprised how many Miyazakis are on this list.
He's
and
very
obviously, as a
beloved.
result of it, I'm going to have to go check it out.
He is the Walt Disney of Japan,
Yeah.
and he's got such a distinct style. The mythologies, most, if not all of them, are just come out of his mind. But they feel so developed and full worlds, and I absolutely love when a world is created in film or in literature that you feel like you could kind of stretch and walk around in. And these worlds of Miyazaki's seem very complete.
Yeah. Number 138 on the list is from 2004. It's a movie called Downfall. I'm not familiar with this film, but based on the description of it here, I'm kind of surprised that I'm not familiar with it. Do you know much about it?
I have seen it. This film, again, from 2004, it is the last X number of days in the life of Adolf Hitler as he hides in the bunker, takes a final tour around parts of Berlin. The war is about to close, and of course, eventually he commits suicide along with his girlfriend, who he marries, I think, hours before they commit mutual suicide. And of course, I want to say Goering and his family. There's a sad scene here where Goering has like 6 kids. Him and his wife kill them all.
Wow.
Before killing themselves. It's sad, strong film. You are more than likely familiar with it, but not aware that you're familiar with it. There's a certain scene where Hitler's really upset, and he's banging on his table, and he's yelling at his staff, and this has been repurposed on YouTube many, many times.
Yeah.
So Hitler's angry about this famous celebrity got married to a different celebrity, or Hitler's angry, I saw one, because home teaching isn't done.
Yeah.
And it's an all-purpose meme vehicle. 137, Batman Begins from 2005, start of Christopher Nolan's Christian Bale Batman cycle. A pretty strong film, not as strong as The Dark Knight. I think I've only seen this once, but I remember thinking it was good. There's a lot of backstory to Batman in this movie.
Yeah. I've seen this several times. This is a really strong film. It's a good film, and yet I'm surprised it's in the top 150.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised to see it in the top 250 at all. I'm surprised it's at 137.
I can see that.
Number 136 on the list, Rang de Basante. I'm not familiar with this one, are you?
2006 Indian film, the story of 6 young Indians who assist an English woman to film a documentary on the freedom fighters from their past and the events that lead them to relive the long-forgotten saga of freedom. I don't think I've ever heard of this movie.
Yeah, me neither.
135, V for Vendetta, is a film that you're more partial to than I am. It's good.
Yeah, I like this film. This is a good film, but again, I'm surprised it's this high on the list.
It's a future dystopian England. It's become a totalitarian state. And Guy Fawkes, who's a character from English history and also mythos, is resurrected in the form of the Guy Fawkes masks for kind of freedom fighter / terrorists.
Yep.
Been a long time since I've seen it. It's got Hugo Weaving and Natalie Portman in it.
Yeah, it's a really good film. If you've never seen this, I'd check it out. Again, this is one that I would expect to be in the top 250. Surprised it's at 135, but yeah, it's a good film. Number 134 from 2006, Pan's Labyrinth. What do you want to say about this? Guillermo del Toro, I mean, it's a well-liked film. I've seen it. I know it's well-liked. It's not one of my favorites.
I saw it theatrically. It's very visually spectacular. There's things about it that are really good, but it never quite struck the chord with me that it did for a lot of people. And this, I remember watching the Oscars and just being very concerned that this film not beat The Lives of Others. And it didn't, and that made me happy. I actually own a copy of this film. It was given to me as a Christmas present. I've seen it 2 or 3 times. Again, visually quite impressive. There's some good things about it, but it just not really my cup of tea.
Yeah.
Didn't really resonate. 133, There Will Be Blood by Paul Thomas Anderson. Daniel Day-Lewis won an Oscar for this film, which also features Paul Dano. It is based loosely on an Upton Sinclair novel from the early 20th century called Oil. It's about a man and his obsession with oil and how it destroys his relationship with his adopted son. It takes place over the course of decades.
Yeah. It's a good film.
Strong, very good film.
Yeah.
Very good film.
Number 132, The Wolf of Wall Street, another Martin Scorsese film. Again, surprised it's this high on the list.
I have not seen it. Have you seen it?
You have not seen
I've
this?
not seen it.
I'm surprised that you haven't seen this.
It's got a good cast.
I'll lend it to you sometime.
Leonardo DiCaprio, Jonah Hill, who I believe lost a lot of weight around the time he started in this part, or maybe that was later.
I think that's a different movie.
Margot Robbie, Matthew McConaughey. I hear it's very decadent.
I don't know how much to say about this, but yeah, it's interesting. It's worth seeing.
Based on a true story about a corrupt Wall Street guy who eventually turned a new leaf, I'm assuming. Maybe. Or maybe we won't talk about it.
Yeah.
But it's 80s Wall Street excess film by Scorsese. 131, Up, 2009, starring Ed Asner. It is a Disney animated film. That opening sequence in Up, you want to cry. It's just one of the sweetest things I've ever seen, animated or not. It's a story about a grumpy old man, voiced, of course, by Ed Asner, and absolutely perfect casting, who befriends a young scout, and they go on a journey together on a house propelled by balloons, and they meet a talking dog named Doug.
Yep. It's a beautiful film. Yeah. I'm assuming most people who listen to us will have seen the movie Up. But yeah, it's a beautiful film.
Talk briefly about the Up House here in Utah.
Didn't they end up repainting it?
I think you drove me by it at one point.
Well, I think since then it's been repainted. Mm-hmm. They got in trouble with their HOA for the painting.
So there was a house built to look like the house from Up,
and it was painted to match that. And you could look up, if you go look up KSL.com, you can find stories about it where they got in trouble with their HOA, and their HOA was trying to force them to repaint it. I don't remember if they ended up repainting it or not.
Was this, do you recall, built as like part of a giveaway or a contest or something, or did somebody just
built as part of the
decide?
Parade of Homes?
Oh, okay, yeah. A novelty house.
Yeah, Parade of Homes here in Utah is something where it's a real estate gimmick. People build homes, and people tour around and come and look at these homes people built for the purpose of this show. So, number 130 on the list. I'm pretty sure you've seen this, but I haven't. It's from 2011. It's a movie called Warrior, starring Tom Hardy, Nick Nolte, Joel Edgerton. Yeah.
I think I've heard of it. I think there might have been a different Tom Hardy boxing movie that I might be confusing it with. I only think I've heard of it, but I definitely have not seen it.
Yeah, sometime we'll probably end up having to see it, but yeah.
129, The Secret in Their Eyes, appears to be Spanish. A retired legal counselor writes a novel hoping to find closure for one of his past unresolved homicide cases. A retired legal counselor.
Yep.
Not a detective? Anyway, trying to get closure on this case, something, unreciprocated love with his superior, both of which still haunt him decades later. I don't know it.
Yeah. Number 128. Again, I haven't heard of this one. It's called Gangs of Wasabi.
A conflict between a Sultan and Shiad Khan. A clash between Sultan and Shiad Khan leads to the expulsion of Khan from Wasapur and ignites a deadly blood feud that lasts generations. Appears to be Indian. I've not heard of it.
Yeah, me neither.
127, Inside Out. This is a Disney, as opposed to Pixar, animated film featuring the voices of Amy Poehler, Bill Hader, Louis Black, and Richard Kind, and Mandy Kaling. A pretty good voice cast. There was a cartoon that Disney did back World War II era about emotion and reason driving a man inside a man's head. I think I showed that to you at some point. But this is basically an expansion on that. There was also a TV show in the early 90s called Herman's Head, where different emotions or aspects of a personality live in the brain and make decisions together for comic effect. These particular emotions are in the mind of a little girl whose family has just relocated across country, and she's feeling depressed as a result of that.
Yeah.
It's good.
It's a good film. I suspect it's this high on the list because it's more recent. I suspect over time that will drop down. Up was a better film than this. Good film, but not. I don't think it should be 127 on this list.
Yeah.
Number 126, Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, from 2017, directed by Martin McDonough, starring Frances McDormand, Woody Harrelson, Sam Rockwell. Sam Rockwell won an Academy Award for this, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This was a good film. It was probably one of the best films I saw in 2017.
I was a little underwhelmed by it. It wasn't as good as I wanted it to be.
Sam Rockwell certainly deserved his.
He was good. I don't know. It just didn't fully work for me.
Yeah. I don't think it's the best performance I've seen Sam Rockwell do, but I think he deserves
he
the
definitely
award.
deserves an award, whether it was for this film or another film. Yeah, it has to do with kind of racism as an aspect of it. It's an unsolved murder in this little town, and the lady whose daughter was murdered is very upset that the sheriff's department hasn't been able to solve it. And a year or so after the death, to express her displeasure, she rents 3 billboards outside of town that have criticism of the police department on them for not solving her daughter's murder. And this leads to tension and conflict with the police department. Woody Harrelson is the sheriff. He is suffering from cancer, but he's not been super public about that. Sam Rockwell is his deputy. He's kind of a racist. He lives with his mother. It's good, but it just didn't fully work for me. I was left a little wanting. 125, Green Book. This was kind of the surprise winner of the Best Picture Oscar last year. It is based, at least loosely, on a true story about a Italian-American bouncer who becomes the driver of an African-American classical pianist on a tour of venues through the 1960s American South. It stars Viggo Mortensen, Mahershala Ali. I need to learn how to pronounce Mahershala Ali, and Linda Cardellini. Period piece. It kind of goes where Driving Miss Daisy has been before, and there was an extent to which it felt like not only is it a film set in an earlier time, but it feels like a film from 20, 25 years ago. Well, this is racial territory that we've already pretty well covered in film before.
But it's the Disney version of that. Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it should have won. It was fine. It was better than I thought it would be. I came in.
It was really good.
Kind of
I liked
it. To it.
But I agree with you. It probably shouldn't have ended up being the winner. Mm. So, number 124 from 1921, The Kid, directed by Charles Chaplin, also stars in it. I have not seen this.
It's a classic Chaplin film. Ironically, it's one that I have not seen. It's very iconic. You've seen probably bits and pieces from it before. I've seen bits and pieces from it homaged in other films. There was an episode of Alf that basically redid the story. Yeah, so Alf imagines himself as Charlie Chaplin in The Kid. Really kind of odd that existed and was put on network TV.
Yeah.
The little kid in the film was played by an actor named Jackie Coogan. Jackie Coogan would have kind of a troubled... He was an early child star, possibly one of the first. And he had an alcoholism problem, if memory serves. But he would go on to be Uncle Fester on the original Addams Family TV series in the 1960s.
Nice.
123 is Metropolis from 1927. This is a German film directed by Fritz Lang, who would later immigrate to the United States and direct a lot of good kind of crime films, like the Big... This is what happens when I don't research. The Big Something... Fury, pretty prolific director. He also did Woman in the Window, a number of other films. But anyway, this is a film that was made at UFA, which was the big German film studio. It didn't bankrupt UFA, but it could have. It was not a super successful film. Science fiction epic, has to deal with a society where the rich people live a life of pleasure and ease on the surface, and the poor live a Morlock-like existence of oppression underneath. Some wonderful special effects for its time period. This was actually re-released in the 1980s, colorized version with a rock soundtrack, which I've been curious to see, but I've seen the original film. There's quite a few different cuts of it. Historically, very important film, some impressive special effects for the time.
Number 122 is also another Fritz Lang movie. This is the 1931 film M.
Yes, M is a film about a child murderer. A child murderer is played by Peter Lorre. I will spoil the ending of M. The good people of the city where he's murdering the children get together and they kill him.
Yeah.
They chase him down and they kill him. The murderer is played by Peter Lorre. Peter Lorre is a Jewish actor. This film was made in Germany in 1931, a year or two before the Nazis' rise to power. There's a story. Peter Lorre was at some kind of public event or something in Germany in the early 30s, and he ended up on a elevator with, I think it was Goebbels, Goebbels or Goring, whichever one was in charge of their media production. And he said it was very tense, elevator ride, and that the high-ranking German turned to him and just very quietly said, "You should really leave. You should really get out of the country." Yeah. So he was off to France as soon as possible afterwards. A strong film. Obviously, it's tinted a bit by subsequent historical happenings. Kind of difficult to watch, if I remember correctly. I don't know if I'd want to revisit him, but it's very strong filmmaking. 121, Citizen Kane. Some people, many people, including Roger Ebert, consider Citizen Kane to be the best film of all time.
Yeah, it has a Metascore of 100 on IMDb. Slightly surprised that it's
very
down at 121.
Very surprised to see it at 121.
Well, especially with a Metascore of 100. The IMDb average rating is 8.3, which is why it's down where it's at. But yeah.
This was Orson Welles' first film. He was best known at the time for doing a radio show called the Mercury Radio Theater, which is most famous for its 1938 War of the Worlds broadcast. Yeah. He was given a lot of freedom in making his first film, and the studio did not appreciate what he ended up making. But subsequently it has been deemed, it was well received by critics, at least at the time, though not necessarily by audiences. It is a classic. Some of the stuff they do visually in this film, Greg Toland was the cinematographer. There's very few named cinematographers, but Greg Toland is one. And he earns it in this film with wonderful uses of shadow, wonderful compositions of shots, very great, strong performances from the cast, most of which worked with Welles on the Mercury Theater. He imported them to Los Angeles to make this film. Joseph Cotten of that group is the one that went on to be the biggest star. Welles, though, is the most iconic name. You have seen it, right?
Nope.
You've not seen Citizen Kane?
Nope.
You must see Citizen Kane.
It's on my list, but yeah.
Yeah, great. It's a must film for film literacy.
Yep. Number 120 from 1944, directed by Billy Wilder, is Double Indemnity.
Double Indemnity. You have not seen it, right?
Nope.
A number of years ago, they were showing it in a local theater, and I remember I invited you, but you couldn't go for whatever reason.
Yeah, I don't remember what... Yeah, I remember that, but I don't remember what I was doing.
Some people consider it one of the first film noir films. It stars Fred MacMurray, Barbara Stanwyck, and Edward G. Robinson. And Fred MacMurray is an insurance agent in the Los Angeles area. The film came out in 44, but it's set in 38, 39, just before the war. A lot of films that came out during the war, if they're telling stories that have, the main characters that should have been in uniform serving in the war, in order to work around that, they just backdate it, 4 years or so. It is... Fred MacMurray is an insurance agent. He ends up having an affair with the wife of one of his clients, and they conspire to kill her husband to collect the insurance money. His plan has a double indemnity clause on it that if he dies, in a train accident or falling off a train, they get double the payout. Double indemnities are put onto policies as kind of bonuses, extras. Unlikely causes of death can get you extra money. Things do not work out well for Fred MacMurray in this film. And Edward G. Robinson plays his mentor at the insurance agency, whose job is to find insurance fraud. And
he's an insurance investigator.
He's been trying to recruit Fred MacMurray from sales to insurance investigation because he thinks Fred MacMurray is real smart and would be good at it. And they have this wonderfully kind of complicated relationship because he really respects this guy, but he's got to fool him. Great film. 119, Bicycle Thieves, sometimes miscorrectly titled Bicycle Thief. 1948, Vittorio De Sica. It is about a man and his child in post-war Italy. He makes his living by putting posters up on walls, and he has to get around the city on his bicycle. But somebody steals it, threatening his livelihood and his ability to keep his son. Very sad. The only other De Sica film that I can think of that I've seen is a film from a few years later called Umberto D, about an old man on a pension trying to keep his dog alive. This man makes really sad but beautiful films.
Number 118 on the list is another Kurosawa. This is Ikairu.
From 1952. A bureaucrat tries to find a meaning in his life after he discovers he has terminal cancer. It does not sound like a particularly happy
uplifting film.
I have not seen it. Probably should. 117, Singing in the Rain. Love Singing in the Rain.
It's a good film.
Just one of the most joyous films that there is.
Yeah.
Co-directed by Gene Kelly and Stanley Donen. Mr. Donen only passed away, I think, last year. He was in his late 90s.
Yeah.
Starring Gene Kelly, Donald O'Connor, and Debbie Reynolds, and Gene Hagen. Just a classic film.
Oh, yeah.
One of the most, even if you don't like musicals, watch this musical.
Yeah, this is a great film. Yeah, there's not much else to say about it. Number 116 is the Alfred Hitchcock Vertigo from 1958, starring Jimmy Stewart, Kim Novak. This is an iconic film and a well-done film.
Excellent film. I remember the first time I saw it with some friends of mine, one of whom was also named Rob, different Rob, and Steve. We saw it, I think, like July 5th, 1998, over at Steve's house.
That's oddly specific.
It's oddly specific because we'd known each other, and we just started hanging out, particularly at the Ward Christmas party. Not the Ward Christmas, the Ward 4th of July picnic.
Okay.
And then we went and saw Lost in Space, and then the next day we watched Vertigo. And it's just lodged in my mind. It's a great film, seen it a number of times. Excellent performances by Jimmy Stewart. A lot of people think of Jimmy Stewart in it's like the persona he had in the 30s and also into the 40s, which was very aw shucks. But there was a darker Jimmy Stewart that really came into focus in the 50s, and this is that darker Jimmy Stewart, this conflicted Jimmy Stewart. Kim Novak's rather good in this. She plays two roles. It's a beautiful-looking film, as Hitchcock films tend to be. It's very haunting. A wonderful sense of unease, of vertigo about the entire thing. He's a police detective who almost falls off of a building while pursuing a criminal. He gets a serious case of vertigo as a result of that. He's suspended, I think, or put on leave. A friend of his has a wife that has been acting funny, and so he hires Jimmy Stewart, because he's not doing anything, to follow around his wife. The wife appears to believe she is possessed by the ghost of a woman who committed suicide. Eventually it appears that she has committed suicide, and then a year or so after that, and Jimmy Stewart has fallen in love with her while guarding her, he meets a woman that looks exactly like her.
Yeah.
And it causes another downward spiral in his life. Wonderful film. 115, North by Northwest, another Hitchcock film. It came out the year after Vertigo. It's from 1959. It stars Cary Grant, Eva Marie Saint, and James Mason. Cary Grant is a man, it's a case of mistaken identity, wrong place, wrong time. It's been a while since I've seen this. What's he mistaken as a spy, or?
I can't remember what he's, I don't, well,
people
he's
go
mistaken
after
for
him.
A government agent, but he's an advertising executive.
Yeah. So
by a group of foreign spies.
Yeah, so he goes on the run. There's a number of iconic scenes in this film. There's the airplane attack in the field. Yep. There's the climbing on Mount Rushmore.
The train scene.
Yeah.
I love this film. This is a great film. For some reason, I never realized this was directed by Alfred Hitchcock. I actually just started I rewatched this again, about a year ago. I've watched it a couple times since then. I have some very specific memories of watching a particular scene in this movie in my grandparents' house on the old Midvale Main Street. And I hadn't realized what movie it was until just last year.
Oh, really?
That it was North by Northwest. But I remember, as a young child, probably between 8 and 10, watching this with my grandparents at their house. And yeah, this is a great movie. Mm. Yeah.
It is loosely a remake of an earlier film of Hitchcock's, which, again, not researching this, it's one with Bob Cummings. It's not Suspicion. It's Suspicious. Very similar title. But it's also about people fleeing, and I tend to recall there being a sequence on a train. Anyway, it's hard to find a bad Hitchcock film.
Yeah.
And this is a great Hitchcock film.
Number 114 on the list. Nate and I probably should have swapped for these ones if we'd known it was coming. This is also another great film. I rated this 9 out of 10 stars. This is from 1960. It is The Apartment, directed by Billy Wilder, starring Jack Lemmon, Shirley MacLaine, Fred McMurray, and Ray Walston. Yeah, this is a great film.
This is one of my absolute favorite films. It's both a Christmas film and a New Year's film, because the majority of the plot takes place in December 1959.
Yep.
This was the last black and white film to win a Best Picture Oscar until Schindler's List.
Yeah.
And then, of course, The Artist was another black and white film that would go on to win. This is about, as most Billy Wilder films are, it's about cynicism. Jack Lemmon is a young man working for an insurance company in New York City. He's ambitious. One day, he loaned one of his superiors a key to his apartment so this superior would have a place to change clothes for like a wedding reception. And he ended up being kind of drug in to this system whereby he supplies his apartment for his superiors to use for extramarital trysts, and in exchange, they agree to give him good reports and help him get promoted within the firm. He has a crush on this elevator girl, played by Shirley MacLaine, who eventually he finds out is the mistress of one of these superiors. It's a great film.
Yeah.
It's I'd have to think about it for a while to be able to put into words my feelings about the film, but it's a top 10 film for me. I absolutely love it.
I suspect at some point in the future we'll end up rewatching this. We've watched it together before, but I suspect at some point we'll end up going back and rewatching this as a standalone episode of this podcast.
Number 113, Lawrence of Arabia. This is a film to be seen on a big screen, and I was fortunate enough about 14 years ago, to see it on the big screen at the old Egyptian Theater in downtown Boise. I'd seen it before. I've seen it several times. It's based on the true story of T.E. Lawrence, who was a British officer who worked with the Arabs in the First World War to fight against the Ottoman Empire. He gave them he loved the Arabs. He loved the people. He loved the culture. He promised them a lot of things because he thought that they would be delivered on. I believe he was promised that they would be given their independence, but that was never really the intention of the British general staff, so he felt kind of forced into betraying them. It's the film that made Peter O'Toole a big star. It also has Alec Guinness, who's a favorite of the film's director, David Lean. David Lean is one of the most consistently strong directors I think there's ever been. I don't think I've seen a David Lean movie that wasn't amazing. Anthony Quinn's in this. Jack Hawkins is in this. Is also an actor that David Lean liked to work with. Excellent film. Definitely see. Do not see it on your smartphone. See it on as big a screen as you possibly can, because that's what it's composed for.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but it's on my list. Number 112 on the list is from 1962, To Kill a Mockingbird. This is a great film starring Gregory Peck, John Megna, Frank Overton, and Rosemary Murphy. Gregory Peck is Atticus Finch, who's a lawyer in the South in the Depression era, who is assigned to defend a black man against some undeserved rape charges. And yeah, it's a lot of the movie is through the perspective of his children, but this is a great film. It is
a great film. I remember reading the book. It was required in high school and absolutely loving the book. And shortly after we read the book, they showed the movie in class. And the book is better than the movie.
Yeah.
And seeing it in proximity made it seem not as good as it really is. But you take some distance from the book, it's an amazing movie. And we actually got to see it theatrically a couple months back. Number 111, For a Few Dollars More, from Sergio Leone. This is one of the Man with No Name trilogy of Western films starring Clint Eastwood. These are spaghetti westerns. They're made in Italy or Spain by Spanish directors with international casts. Clint Eastwood was on, or had recently been on, I think, Rawhide? What was his? There was a Western he was on.
I don't recall.
But I want to say he made, not necessarily this one, but the first in the trilogy, like while he was on summer break, when they weren't filming the film. I've not seen it. I definitely need to see these Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns, the Sergio Leone ones. Sergio Leone's excellent film. I've seen his Once Upon a Time in the West, Once Upon a Time in America, which, of course, is the inspiration for the title of the recent Tarantino film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yep.
Which is excellent. Again, haven't seen For a Few Dollars More. Have you seen it? Have you seen any of the Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns?
I haven't seen any of them, no. Number 110 on this film, I think this is another favorite of Nate's, 2001, A Space Odyssey from 1968, directed by Stanley Kubrick.
It's a great film. Gary Lockwood is maybe the only name that you might kind of maybe recognize. I think he's been in a few other things. It's basically a no-name cast. The star of this film is the score the special effects and the cinematography. I was lucky enough in 2018, they were showing it on the IMAX screen at the Jordan Commons. Shortly after I saw this on the IMAX screen, I also saw on the IMAX screen First Man.
Oh, yeah.
This is better.
Really?
Visually, it's even better.
Oh, than First Man.
And it's better as a better movie than First Man. I appreciated First Man on a technical level, but Neil Armstrong is boring. He's a boring person to be the lead of your film. But 2001 is an amazing film. The things they do in this film, you got this whole sequence at the beginning in prehistory with the apes, and one of the things that I really love about this film is corporate names. So a good portion of it takes place in, obviously, the early 21st century. This is projecting forward from an optimistic late 1960s in which the space program has continued to grow. Commercial space travel is a thing. There are bases on the moon. And you see these names, GE, I want to say Westinghouse, there's a Hilton on a space station, and just these names of mid-20th century American prosperity. There's just something about that I love. It's just this little side thing to it. It's an amazing movie. You have to see it.
Yeah, I've not seen it.
109, A Clockwork Orange, another Stanley Kubrick film. It's based on a novel. Understand the adaptation is a little loose. Kubrick has a reputation for being loose in his adaptations, best known example being The Shining. This is about a young man played by Malcolm McDowell who beats with his, I think there might have been a rape and murder and beating. He's an awful, awful person. And he is apprehended, and he is subjected to a new form of therapy that makes you physically sick at the thought or seeing violence. And then they release him back into the world, and he is no longer capable of defending himself. So it's this weird kind of playing with your sympathies. This is an awful person.
Yeah.
But what they did to him for good reason is also awful. Strong film.
Number 108 on the list from 1973. This is The Sting, starring Paul Newman and Robert Redford. I haven't seen this.
You're not seeing The Sting?
No.
You love Butch, Cassian, the Sundance Kid. This is the follow-up reteaming of Paul Newman and Robert Redford. It's George Roy Hill, who I think he's the same director as Butch, Cassian, the Sundance Kid.
Yeah.
This is the film that won the Oscars in between the two Godfather films.
Nice.
It's a great film. We were talking earlier in reference to another movie or two, one of which was Proof of Life. Proof of Life is a film where nothing happens for a long, long time. A lot of setup, some of it very good, but the ending's like, oh my God, all this stuff's happening. This is a film where it is 2 hours of setup for a 4 or 5 minute conclusion scheme thing, and it's worth it.
Yeah.
107 we spoke about earlier a little bit, Taxi Driver, a film that made Scorsese and De Niro, big names. From 1976, he is Travis Bickle, so a Vietnam veteran, disillusioned, mentally a little unhinged. He attempts to date Sybil Shepherd, who is working at a presidential primary campaign. He also befriends a young prostitute played by Jodie Foster. Part of him wants to be a hero. Part of him wants to kill the presidential candidate. I can't say too much about it at this point. It wouldn't be fair to get into it unless we're going to talk about it in more detail, but it is quite the film. I highly recommend. You have to see it.
It's on my list.
Because, I mean, this feeds into two films that we've seen recently very directly that you quite liked. So definitely see Taxi Driver.
Yep. Number 106 on the list. Number 106 is Das Boot. I recently purchased this. I have not seen it yet. I purchased it so that I can watch it, but haven't gotten around to watching it yet.
I have not seen it. I've heard of it. It has a very strong reputation. There are at least two versions of Das Boot. There's the theatrical version, which was released here in the States, cut from a German miniseries. It's considerably longer. This film version, fairly long at 149 minutes. But I want to say the miniseries is something like 6 hours long. It's about German officers on a U-boat during World War II. 105, Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, the conclusion. of the original Star Wars trilogy. It's a real rouser. It's a fun film.
It's a good film. I'm surprised it's higher than many of these films. But yeah, it's a good film, but I don't know that it deserves to be 105. Number 104, Scarface from 1983. Iconic film with Al Pacino, Michelle Pfeiffer. Yeah.
Directed by Brian De Palma, this is a remake of an earlier film from the early 30s by the same title. Scarface was a nickname of Al Capone. He did have a scar on his face, hence why it was one of his nicknames. I have not seen this film. There's some famous lines from it, in particular, Say Hello to My Little Friend, which even though it's in a film about a cocaine-rattled mobster in Miami, I have seen used in children's films, that line, which is just kind of odd.
Yep.
103, Amadeus. I want to say this was a Best Picture winning film, 1983. Tom Hulk won an
84.
Oscar for it. 84, yeah. Tom Hulk didn't really have much of a career afterwards. F. Murray Abraham's excellent in this. I saw this in a choir class in middle school.
Yeah.
After the choir competitions were done for the year, we had a couple weeks where we just watched movies that had music in them. So
This is a
Amadeus
common
would fit.
thing and highly despised by other educators.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Just that choirs watch musicals?
They should be using it as education time. Even though they no longer have competitions and things like that, why are they having a class in educational time when they're not being educated?
Amadeus is kind of educational.
Amadeus is one
Loosely.
of the few that you could make that statement about. Number 102 on the list. I'm completely unfamiliar with this. It's from 1985, called Come and See.
After finding an old rifle, a young boy joins the Soviet resistance movement against ruthless German forces and experiences the horrors of World War II. Was this made in the Soviet Union?
I have no idea, but there's a lot of Russian names in it.
Yeah. Sounds intriguing, but I've never heard of it.
Yeah.
And 101, Full Metal Jacket, a Stanley Kubrick film from 1987 about the Marines in Vietnam, starring Matthew Modine, R. Lee Emery, and Vincent D'Onofrio, and Adam Baldwin.
Yeah.
It's on my list. Second to last Stanley Kubrick film. He would not make another film until Eyes Wide Shut, which came out shortly after his death in 1999.
Yeah. This film made R. Lee Ermey quite famous.
Yeah, wasn't he? He was on the Micro Machine commercials, or
he's
G.I. Joe, or something like
No,
that.
he in various shows has continued to portray a drill sergeant for the remainder of his life.
He passed away a few years
Yeah.
back.
Yep.
Well, that takes us through the first up to number 100, so that's where we'll pick up next time as we slowly and ramblingly and inconsistently, in terms of our knowledge, make our way through the IMDb top 250 movie list.
Yep.
This is Nate,
And I'm Rob.
and this is Rob and Nate Record a Podcast.